probably heard all the influencers promoting a certain form of magnesium called magnesium L-threonate, or other magnesium products that have 5, 7, 9, even 10 different forms of magnesium in one product. But is that necessary? In this episode, we unpack all things minerals, as well as natural, whole food versus synthetic supplements, the truth about the absorption and assimilation rates of minerals and their different forms, the functional pairing of minerals, such as magnesium and calcium, zinc and copper, and others. We explore the problem with testing your mineral levels, why it's more challenging than just looking at a blood serum test, and perhaps more importantly, why all modern foods are depleted and almost all humans have deficiencies of many minerals. Then, things like fluoride and how other chemicals interact with minerals. Our guest breaks down the benefits of fulvic and humic acids, and we discuss one of my favorite supplements called Shilajit. We also go a bit deeper into the whole world of the magnesium supplement market and the false advertising around minerals and supplements in general. We also briefly cover yeast overgrowth, how that occurs, and the consequences of it. If you want to explore magnesium and minerals even deeper, go back and check out episode number 153 with Dr. Carolyn Dean. She's our guest today, and she's a medical doctor and a naturopath and best-selling author. She's spent the last more than 50 years committed to applying the science of medicine and the gifts of nature to help people feel better, find more energy, and take control of their personal health. If you want to explore her work further, you can check out her original book titled Magnesium Miracle. That's a thick, comprehensive overview of all things magnesium, or her newer book, which is a easier to get through synopsis of that, called Magnesium: The Missing Link to Total Health. We also discuss one of her other new books called Total Body Reset for Men. All of the books, the products, and the topics we discuss will be in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at mindbodypeak.com/the number 176. Since I recorded with her last time, I've also been using two of her products, her Remite, which is basically a full spectrum multi-mineral product, and Remag, magnesium specifically, both in their picometer sized ionic form. Don't worry if you don't understand what that means. We discussed it in the episode. But I've been using that since my last interview with her, and those have been my staple mineral sources. If you want to give her products a shot, go ahead and use the code URBAN, URBAN, to save 10% on your order. All right, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Dr. Carolyn Dean. Dr. Dean, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Nick. Good to be with you.
So we recorded our first version, the first part of this podcast months ago, around March, April of this year. And I wanted to follow up with you because there is a lot that we didn't discuss, and there's a lot of confusion in the world of nutrition and supplements and vitamins and minerals. So we are going to dive back into that topic today. But before we get started, what have you done so far? The unusual non-negotiables for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony.
Well, actually, I think I might have talked about my injury on the last show. And I injured my elbow and my knee, and I had horrible blood, kind of inflammatory blood buildup. My arm looked like my leg.
Mm.
And a friend of mine uses ozone,
Oh,
and I mean, decades ago, I had been involved with a group and we worked with ozone, injectable ozone, actually. But I hadn't gotten back into it. So my friend gave me some IM, intramuscular or intra-tissue ozone, and it helped to break down the blood
mm.
clots. And then I bought my own machine and started to do ozone enemas. I mean, what we're looking for are ways of uh, maintaining their health, detoxifying, fighting off infections. And I've been a biohacker forever. I keep saying that I've solved the biohacking problem because of my dietary supplements, but I'm willing to experiment. Well, actually, what happened was my first treatment. I of course did too much ozone, and I had a Herxheimer reaction because
Mm,
I was killing off whatever. I got a bit of a cold and a cough, and it was very minor because, I take my silver products and my zinc products, and I coughed myself into a back muscle spasm.
oh man.
So I had my elbow injury, my knee injury. I couldn't really get in and out of bed without straining my back. But I was pretty much healed up from all that. I started this little cough, back spasm,
Mm,
and it was just unbelievable. I took this scarf and tied it around my back and pulled it really tight just so that I could walk around and do hygiene. So, I mean, that was a real lesson to me. I stopped getting my massages. I couldn't get up on a massage table, so I thought, well, I'll hold off on those. So, I think when people get injured, you fall into a pattern of, oh, you sit and wait for it to be over, but you do have to be proactive. So I'll never stop my massages again. And even though I'm, Ms. Magnesium, I had a back spasm that just took me out. When something like that happens to me, Nick, I mean, I think of the people who don't have the resources I have. What happens to someone, my age and getting such a horrible symptom? They'll go to the hospital and be put on opioids and fentanyl and all the rest of it because it was just, I couldn't move. So we're just so fortunate to be able to educate people, you and your podcast, me, my radio show, and what I'm doing. But we all have to take responsibility for our health and just, never give up.
and ozone therapy was one of those tools that you used. Anything else? I mean, obviously, we'll talk a lot about nutrients and their role. And if anyone hasn't tuned into our previous podcast, you are the queen of magnesium therapy. You popularized it in the US with your book, The Magnesium Miracle. I read it years ago, and you mentioned that it's 600 pages, and there's a new abbreviated version you have right behind you called Magnesium, the Missing Link. Fantastic resource to understand just how important this is. And magnesium, although it's extremely powerful, is one of many nutrients. But before we go into the nutrient side of things, any other biohacks or recovery techniques and technologies you've used?
Um, I'm getting into turmeric more and more. I've got my farm that I support, growing acres of turmeric. I'm going to bring that out as a product because turmeric is going to be very important. As it helps with detoxifying radiation, apparently, plus all the other things we hear about. And what one of my suppliers said is it's very difficult to get pure organic turmeric anymore. So that's what I'm working on that, and I continue to work on the farm store, because I hear more and more that farms are being bought up, and there's a real focus to get us away from growing our own food and sort of the agriculture and the animal husbandry. Whoever wants us to eat bugs and mealworms and get away from animal products. So that intensifies my focus on the farm, so that, I mean, even just as an example of someone who can be healthy by just doing good nutrition and a handful of dietary supplements. We all need that. And
I love that you said that you've been trying to procure high quality, organic, heavy metal free turmeric and not just saying that to use curcuminoids and curcumin specifically because those surely have their role, but they are an isolated nutrient out of turmeric, and there's a bunch of other stuff in there as well, such as the water soluble, I think they are tumerosaccharides, and a bunch of other like really important bioactives. And for some reason, like the whole world is fixated on this one isolate. And it's like, if that was the case, it would have been used much more heavily over the millennia in Ayurvedic medicine, but instead they always focused on turmeric. And they, yes, they knew different ways of increasing the bioavailability with fats or black pepper, different things like that. But there's also use cases to not increase the bioavailability and to let it go through the GI tract where it exerts different effects as opposed to if you combine it with fat or black pepper or something.
I love that. Yes, and that's what I'm looking at. We'll probably put our catalyst, which is a germinated barley seed liquid. It's one of our oral products, but what's left over, the barley straw, it's the fertilizer for our turmeric. And did I ever tell you about the radish experiment on my farm?
I don't think so.
I don't have scientific proof that this barley straw is as magic as I know it is. So what I did is um, we have two plots at the farm where we grew radish seeds. In one plot, we put our straw. We dug the straw in. In the other plot, we didn't. And the regular watering and all the rest of it. After 25 days, radishes are ready to harvest. In the straw plot, we picked 85 pounds of beautiful radishes, and you don't pick them, you pull them out of the ground. And in the other plot, there were only 3 pounds of radishes that we could sell. The rest of them have been worm infested and eaten, and the weeds had covered them up. 85 pounds compared to 3 pounds. So that's the whole thing about needing good soil amendments and also minerals in the soil. So what we do with the liquid from the barley straw is we dehydrate it into a powder, and we have that in several of our formulas because I think it's a life enhancer. In the soil, the predators will go after weak and dying plants. And our plants with the barley straw were so alive and everything, it would take a lot to bring them down. And that's the same with humans. When we don't have our nutrients, our life force, our positivity, then we attract pathogens. And your subject about the herbs, when I was on the board of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, I think for 6 years, I just saw this infiltration of people who wanted to do research on the most active ingredient in herbs. So they became so focused in a very medical allopathic way that they thought, well, yeah, turmeric is good, but it's really the curcumin that shows in studies that it's better. You take certain actually cancer treatments, from pine needles or something. There's a drug that they create out of the pine needles. And what happens though when you just drink pine needle tea, the other ingredient in the pine needles antidotes the side effects of the active ingredient. So there's this balance that nature has created that we just totally throw out because we want to make the most active ingredient. And what they want to do is find the chemical structure and then make it synthetic out of coal tar. And that's what most of our vitamins are now is derived from coal tar. The higher the dose of a vitamin, like the B vitamins, oh, take 50 milligram Bs, take 100 milligrams. They're all synthetic. So what they do is they force the body to have a reaction. And that forced reaction is what is measured as beneficial. And I think of the world of, ice baths or or really hot saunas, or, all these really forceful detoxifications. They may help a healthy person feel better, but if you're already depleted and you're sweating out all your minerals and you're freezing to death and your body thinks you're dying, yes, you'll throw out a lot of growth factor and whatever IGF, and you'll measure all this and so, wow, that's really working. But over time, the person doesn't feel so good because they're totally drained because they're not replacing the nutrients that they've lost by the emergency that's been created, that like you're near death.
A lot of different places to dig in there. To start off with, I was doing back in the day 45-minute sauna sessions 5, 6, 7 days a week, and I was also taking minerals and other vitamins and nutritional supplements, and I later realized I'd wake up in late at night, sometimes in excruciating pain with a huge cramp, and I'm like, "It can't be mineral deficiency or nutrient deficiency because 'cause I'm consuming so many." I was healthy at the time, but it was just because I was depleting so many through my, like, massive exposure to that on top of exercise, on top of other things. And then once I cut down a little bit and I reduced the sessions, I went a little less frequently. All of a sudden, those symptoms magically disappeared. And I realized that even if I was consuming enough, like my lifestyle, my habits, and everything were making it so that I would really struggle to get a high enough and sufficient enough dose from casual supplementation.
And that's what led me, partly my magnesium deficiency was so bad that, and I had the laxative effect from taking magnesium. So that's what led me to realize we have to have minerals that are absorbed, and then that became the picometer stabilized ions of minerals that they're just stabilized as ions for years in our liquid bottles. So that when people take those minerals, they just jump into the cells because the cell mineral ion channels are picometer in size. So compared to like a mineral compound, because ions don't exist on their own. They have a charge, so they attract something and become a compound. So when you're taking a compound, I mean, you're sweating out all these minerals, but you were taking a compound, and it may be 4 to 20% absorbed even just in the bloodstream. And in the bloodstream, and we've talked about this before, but it bears repeating. In the bloodstream, which is a liquid, you're separating the two ions of a compound. So the magnesium goes over here, the chloride goes over here for a split second. In that split second, you get absorption into the cells. And the and after that split second, the magnesium will bind up again. And what we don't have in medicine is ionized blood testing. The, um, the serum blood test just measures what's in the bloodstream. The red blood cell magnesium test measures what's in the red blood cell. But what's interesting about red blood cells is they don't have mitochondria. And it's in the mitochondria where magnesium really is active. So I don't trust that, but it's better than serum. So all my scientific studies through my company use the ionized magnesium test, which is available in emergency departments sometimes and in ICU units. So we have to get to the point where that's used everywhere so we know how many ions are there in the body at any one time so that we know how much we're able to get into our cells. Our first study out of Purdue, within between the 1 and 2 hour mark, our human subjects absorbed our 300 milligrams of ionized magnesium. And that, I mean, it blew the researchers away. I had to work with calcium researchers because no one was doing magnesium research. They were very impressed by what the importance of magnesium, for one thing. They started looking into it, and then how my form was so well absorbed. Because what happens when you can't measure something, as I said, the serum magnesium doesn't give you any accuracy. It's ignored. This mineral has been ignored. You look at your latest blood test, it's not even on your electrolyte panel. And magnesium is responsible for 80% of known metabolic functions.
What I'm hearing you say is that the current testing for minerals and specifically magnesium is inadequate because it's measuring the blood serum, and where you actually want those minerals is going to be inside the tissues, inside the cells. And we're not able to, most tests don't actually measure that. The ones we're getting show like false optimism. Like, okay, if you actually have a problem with magnesium in your blood serum, there's probably a huge issue there, more than just like a slight mineral deficiency in which the body's compensating for that. But most people, unless you're, like, seriously ill, will not ever see a deviation significant deviation on their serum levels of magnesium.
Right, the compensation is key. The body needs, magnesium so much, especially the heart, that it will force magnesium out of the bones and muscles to keep it looking good in the serum. So doctors, they're just used to seeing, "Oh, it's always within this range." We don't even have to test it. It's so bizarre.
I wanna go back to something you said a minute ago, and that is the role of coal tar and supplements. I think people will be shocked to hear you say those 2 in the same sentence. Can you explain what goes on with the production of most supplements, specifically vitamins, and I don't know about minerals, but maybe minerals too, and how coal tar is related?
In the B vitamins especially, it's happened where, you get a chemical structure and chemists try to repeat that structure, but there's a natural form of a structure like a B vitamin, and there's a synthetic form, and they're as different as your right and left hand. And the chemical structure, uh, when it tries to get into a receptor site, like let's say this is the natural one. So it needs to go down here and fit in that little hole. And it does it because it's a natural. But this other hand, which is the synthetic, it comes in and tries to force, itself in because it's backwards. And it will eventually create some sort of movement, but we don't have the research or the studies on this. It's a levo and dextro forms, natural and synthetic, and some people just poo-poo it. It's like, they poo-poo the whole, ascorbic acid and the whole food vitamin C. Um, Ignoring the fact that ascorbic acid intravenous injections have healed thousands and thousands of people. So I look at ascorbic acid as being kind of a medicinal vitamin C, whereas the whole vitamin C, it has tyrosine, and it has bioflavins, hesperidin, and rutin, and all the rest of it. My magnesium deficiency will cause my tongue to go into spasm, and I'd bite it, and I'd get an ulcer on my tongue that will last for weeks. And of course, I fixed up my magnesium deficiency with my picometer magnesium, but, the tongue, ulceration stopped when I started taking whole food vitamin C, and vitamin C is a pro-collagen nutrient, so I was just healing my collagen. I mean, so when you use you can't use a synthetic for something that the body really needs that natural. Actually, it's, an extension of your topic about people take these herbs and try to break them up and act like a part of it is better than the whole. And it's the same with nutrients. They have to be whole and natural. And that's not a woo-woo statement. That's just common sense.
Yeah. Well, what I hear you saying is that you can take different forms of vitamin C, the whole food-based natural form of vitamin C, and it'll have certain effects. The body will recognize it very easily as the molecule it's looking for, versus something like ascorbic acid, the synthetic man-made version of vitamin C. It might work and still yield like life-saving effects. If you have scurvy and you have synthetic vitamin C, it's going to be fantastic and you'll survive. But that there's more potential downsides and consequences of it because it's acting more like a pharmaceutical in the body than it is a vitamin.
Right, and when you look at a vitamin, and I do it all the time, I look at what are the ingredients, where does it come from? Now, the ascorbic acid that I would use is derived from corn, for example, or sago palm, rather than just the CHO, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, which are the three molecules in coal tar that then can be manipulated into anything. You can force a chemical reaction and create a substance. And I think of nitric oxide. I recently was listening to a podcast about, oh, nitric oxide, it's the key to everything. It's anti-inflammatory, it's vasodilator, it's pro-immune system, and we should all take it. You look up nitric oxide, it doesn't exist as a supplement. What they do is give you amino acid precursors. And the two top ones I saw were citrulline and arginine. And arginine, that gained fame back in the days of us trying to figure out how to treat herpes, either just herpes simplex or herpes genitalia. And we just started throwing a ton of lysine at it. And then we found out if someone has a high arginine diet or is taking arginine supplements, it neutralizes their lysine, and they already have the herpes, in their system, and it hides in the nerve root ganglions in the body. The arginine can actually cause a the herpes to come forth. It was being suppressed by lysine.
Mhm.
In our ordinary diet, we would get our lysine, arginine, and all the 22 amino acids, and everything was balanced. You take arginine, it suppresses lysine, and the virus is released. So when you look at something like that, nitric oxide supplements, you've got a great story. It looks awesome. Okay, let's start taking supplements. You don't know what you're doing when you take single amino acids. That's why I have a protein supplement. It has all the amino acids. And I do put in extra lysine because of the
Mhm.
herpes thing. But when you take a single one, you're biohacking, you're finding out, and all the rest of it. So nitric oxide, then, okay, what helps nitric oxide besides these amino acids? Oh, it's magnesium. You look at you type into PubMed magnesium nitric oxide. Apparently, magnesium regulates nitric oxide. You need magnesium to make nitric oxide. So, what do I tell people? Well, take a protein powder that has all the amino acids and take your magnesium, and you'll get your own nitric oxide. And, the whole thing in the elderly, which I am, where they say, oh, yeah, with age, you're losing this and that and the other thing. And a dozen things that you're deficient in, and most people, they just get all their nutrient deficiency symptoms treated with drugs. But what I say is you take more of the basic nutrients as you age, if things are slowing down a bit, you just take more of the nutrients, whereas medicine will give you drugs, and even natural medicine, naturopaths will give you they'll start going into all the, 100 different supplements that you could be taking, whereas you may just be missing the basics. What are the basics? It's your magnesium, your zinc, your in my world, it's silver as well. You're missing your selenium and your boron. I don't know if we talked about this a few months ago, Nick, but there are 9 minerals that support thyroid hormone production. And if you don't have those minerals, then your thyroid hormones, they, get depleted. You don't have the minerals to remake them. Allopathic and natural medicine waits for your thyroid to be so punked out and your blood tests are really low, then okay, we'll give you thyroid hormone replacement. The allopaths give you a synthetic drug, and the natural medicine people, we think we're doing the, great work because we give armor thyroid or desiccated thyroid, whereas we need those 9 minerals. So the minerals are important. I do start with sea salt in drinking water for a mineral base. There's 72 minerals there. And then what have we got? We've got vitamin A, D, E, B's, of course, and C, and, K. I put, K2 in with the D3. Over here, you've got your omega-3 fatty acids, because 'cause we've got a real problem with, overabundance of omega-6 fatty acids in our diet with the sunflower oil, safflower oil, soybean oil, and canola oil, which is genetically engineered from day one.
Nice and simple. Are there any types of salt that you prefer? Obviously, you're not gonna wanna highly refined and bleached and deodorized and all the things they can sometimes do to butcher and ruin the life-giving properties of salt as it naturally occurs.
Yeah, if it's pure white, it's gone. You want, sea salt with some color to it. Here in Hawaii, ours is, kind of reddish brown, either
Mm.
copper and iron, I don't know which. Um, Himalayan sea salt is usually pinkish. The Celtic sea salts are grayish. I kind of rotate, and, what I my prescription is, you take your body weight in pounds, you divide that number in half, and drink that many ounces of water a day. I say in each liter or quart, but personally, I'm putting a quarter teaspoon in every 16 ounces. And then you drink that through the day. And in one of your big glasses, you'll put your picometer minerals for the day and sip that through the day. Because one of the things about taking nutrients is you don't just take them all at once just to get it done. You have to, especially with the minerals, you have to let your cells absorb as much as they can. And if you give it more than that, then it's wasted. It's gone out through the urine or through the bowel.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, currently I've been using your Remite and Remag products every day for months, and I love them. Big fan. I switched over to using mostly yours and sometimes magnesium chloride spray because it's really good for muscles and soreness and tightness. But I've been consuming that my serving completely all in the morning, and so I'm going to start changing that. And I have a water filter back here. I have a couple throughout the house, and I'm curious if you use any water filtration technologies, any type that you like in particular, because with this, I can just add the Remite and Remag to the reservoir itself. So there's like a 0.75 to zero point 0.8 liters of water in the reservoir. So I can just add it to that and just naturally get some whenever I fill up my water bottle.
Right. I have a carbon filter. I didn't want to go with reverse osmosis because it takes absolutely everything out. And whatever distilled water tastes just so horrible. So I do filtration. We don't have fluoride here. We have chlorine, so I'm getting rid of the chlorine. And then I just put water. I through I get my filtered water in my glasses, and put a quarter teaspoon in every glass, put my minerals in one of them and just drink that through the day. But, there's 2 things to be said about all this hydration. You can't do it too late even in the afternoon or evening. You will get up at night to urinate. So you can drink most of your water in the first 2/3 of the day. The other thing is if you have your sea salted water, you will can actually have less edema. You know, people have swollen fingers, swollen ankles. It can be because you don't have enough minerals. And when you start drinking your water with the minerals, even just the sea salt, you will be putting those minerals into your cells. And when minerals are inside the cells, they will attract water. It's osmosis. So the water goes in the cells and they do their biochemistry. And the water, therefore, is not hanging out in your ankles. So good hydration with minerals is really helpful for edema. And what are people told if they have edema? Oh, you need a diuretic to make you more dehydrated, or you need to stop drinking so much water instead of just saying, well, take minerals.
There's also some municipalities don't use chlorine in their water, they use chloramine, which is much nastier and harder to get rid of, and it doesn't evaporate off the same way, and you need the more specialized filters, and also some places have fluoride, some don't, and a bunch of other chemicals. There's certain resources online. I'll put one in the show notes for this episode so you can look up your municipality and figure out what's in your water, because unfortunately for some people, if you're in a big urban city or you have bad water in terms of the contaminants and other things that are added to it, you might still want to use distilled water or reverse osmosis, even though it's stripped of really important life-giving nutrients like minerals, but then it becomes even more important to add them back in, such as I do. Because the other thing with the some of the contaminants is certain nutrients, I mean, not nutrients, contaminants, like I think it's fluoride, they displace other minerals from your body when you consume them. So you set yourself up for more imbalances by consuming something that seems like it would be doing you a service because it has more minerals than reverse osmosis or distilled water, but then it also is depleting other minerals.
Yeah, and you know my fluoride conversation. Fluoride in the body will bind to magnesium and make a brittle compound called magnesium fluoride or cellate. And it goes into tendons and ligaments and joints. A tendon rupture, uh, is one of the black box warnings on Cipro, which is a fluoride drug. There are a lot of fluoride drugs out there, and you take a drug, and the drug companies say, "Oh, well, the fluoride's not going to disassociate from the drug." It's like, that's what the body does, is breaks these drugs down to get rid of them. It'll either break it down in the liver, but, more importantly, probably in the intestines, the intestinal bacteria just go to work on all these chemicals. So, the magnesium is going to be used up when you take these drugs and the tendon rupture. I mean, I've seen it. Our customers will call up and say, "Oh, I just took Cipro and I ruptured a tendon. It's horrible." Like you say, the heavy metals, yeah, you want to get rid of them. But the other thing that's interesting about magnesium, and probably to a certain extent the other minerals as well, is minerals have their binding sites. They know where they're supposed to be. If you're deficient in the minerals you need, those binding sites can be overtaken by heavy metals. So your defense against heavy metal poisoning is to be mineralized. And when our cells, they have a life cycle. Red blood cells, it's 120 days. All our cells are constantly being replaced. So if you can say to yourself, "Oh, I'm going to mineralize myself with good, well-absorbed minerals," then those minerals in the new cells that are being formed aren't going to aren't going to allow heavy metals to bind to them. And the cells that have the heavy metals, they're going to die off, and you'll get rid of them, urine or bowels.
I also learned that parasite infections, they are actually surprisingly common even in developed first world countries. But one of the benefits they have that's rarely discussed is that they sequester heavy metals. So they can sequester some crazy amount of heavy metals so that they're not actually disrupting your like cellular mechanics. And so if you don't address the heavy metal burden and you go straight for a parasite protocol and you kill them all off, then you're just circulating not only the parasitic debris into circulation, but also then the heavy metals and other things that they were sequestering.
I'm big on yeast overgrowth, obviously. And what happens when you have yeast overgrowth in your mucous membranes, all the way through your body, it's almost like the radish experiment. Your body is more vulnerable and susceptible. When I first started doing hospital rotations when I was in medical school, uh, I had yeast. I didn't really know it. Yeah, I would have been on the birth control pill, ate a lot of sugar, etcetera. So I had yeast, but right away I started to getting staphylococcal little nasal boils, little bacterial infections in my nostrils. I mean, I didn't realize it until many years later that my yeast set me up to get this infection. I mean, all through the years, I would get these little boils every once in a while, and finally I say, "Oh, it's when I'm very yeasty." I don't get them anymore. I mean, that's another thing of the past. So what it made me think is that, okay, then maybe if you have yeast overgrowth, you're more susceptible to parasites, you're more susceptible to bacteria and to viruses. So that's why I make a big deal of getting people on, more of a yeast protocol. I work with Saccharomyces boulardii and humic and fulvic acid and a picometer silver. I'm really happy with taking a gentle antifungal on a daily basis because otherwise we turn ourselves into these, deprived people. We're looking for is it the dopamine hit or we need some pleasure in our lives, and we need the nutrients. And when we don't get enough nutrients, we keep eating and eating. The more deprived we are, the more we're just gonna fall into, addictions just to make ourselves feel better.
You mentioned earlier a couple different things, and that was humic and fulvic acids. And I personally, I haven't told you this, but I use your Remite and Remag alongside Shilajit, which naturally contains those. And I know that Shilajit also, because it contains those, increases the absorption and assimilation of certain other nutrients and supplements. Do you know if it impacts mineral use throughout the body?
Absolutely. Some practitioners use fulvic humic as a mineral supplement. What it is, it's humus from maybe centuries old plant, um, what is it, decomposed areas. They dig it up. I think, one of the big sources in it is in Africa. So it's like a big forest will be under, 20 feet of dirt. And so it's dead material with microbes that are soil bacteria that are in a quiescent state. And then actually, it can be like a probiotic as well as a mineral um, supplement, as you say, somehow helping absorption. I mean, there are books that are written on humic fulvic, and I'm very interested in it. And as I said, I'm using it along with my Saccharomyces boulardii. So yeah, I see a lot of people using it. You're doing so many things with your humic fulvic.
I almost wonder if it's redundant to use the 2 at the same time. Perhaps it would make more sense to use the your minerals in the evening and the Shilajit, which contains humic and fulvic in the morning. That way I have, like, more opportunities to absorb and assimilate, or if it makes sense to maybe there's some kind of synergy where they work better together when used at the same time.
Like we're talking about, have them through the day, put the humic fulvic. Is it a powder that you're taking?
No, so it's well, Shilajit comes in a bunch of different forms. This one the one I have is a liquid. It's a sun-dried tincture, but it tastes terrible, so I don't wanna be having that throughout the day.
So yeah, you could separate them a bit because I don't know if there's research on this, but it just makes sense that a cell can only absorb so much at a time, and the minerals are stored in the cells. So if you take them, you're just going to urinate them out if they're not placed inside the cells.
We've been talking a lot about minerals and specifically magnesium, which makes sense because those are your wheelhouses. And in general, as we've discussed throughout the episode today, single nutrients, isolates, amino acids used without the other things they naturally coexist with can cause potential issues and dysregulations in other systems throughout the body. What's your approach to mineral balancing? Because there's certain minerals that they balance each other out. Like there's a couple calcium, magnesium, there's zinc and copper. There's a bunch of different like ratios. And why is magnesium exempt from that? And why do you focus on taking magnesium? Why don't you balance it out with calcium? And what's your view of the landscape of mineral balancing?
Okay, I started thinking while you were talking about peptides, so put that aside, 'cause, I don't know much about them, but I wanna talk about them. You probably know more than I do. So with minerals, the big question I get is, "Well, I've read that you can't take calcium with magnesium, they antagonize one another, this, that." I said, "Well, God put all the minerals in these plants." It's usually at the farmer's market where someone's asking me. I said, all the minerals are in these plants, so they work synergistically. We cannot, you know, use some sort of theory that, well, they're antagonists, so you take them separately. I mean, that puts up it's like too much work for people to try to do all that. They'll just stop taking things if you tell them, well, you can't take them together. So that's number 1. Calcium and magnesium, they got so misunderstood. There was some, French researcher, a magnesium researcher who said in French, "Never take more than 2 times calcium to magnesium." And that got mistranslated as we have to take 2 parts calcium to magnesium. So all the supplements then had, whatever, 300 milligrams of calcium and 150 of magnesium, whereas I say it should be 1 to 1. And that gets all messed up too because calcium is so poorly absorbed. It is like 4% absorbed in a supplement form, and so much of it is like calcium carbonate, and that's chalk. So we're taking a calcium supplement that's not absorbed, that causes constipation, but some of it does precipitate out into the arteries. There have been studies showing that women who just simply take calcium supplements have a higher risk for heart disease because their arteries are clogged with calcium and cholesterol. And cholesterol's not the bad guy here. That whole thing, just a sidebar, is the arteries are kinda damaged because you don't take enough vitamin C to make your collagen keep your arteries healthy. And often at a bifurcation point, where the big artery then bifurcates into smaller ones that descends into capillaries. At those bifurcation points, there's a stress. And if you don't have your vitamin C to make your collagen, then that stress gets to be a little tear. Cholesterol comes along and puts a patch on it. And, nitric oxide has something to do there, and that means magnesium is important. And if that cholesterol stays for any length of time, calcium will deposit. So that's your heart disease, that's your high blood pressure, your blockage of your coronary arteries and your carotid arteries. So, 600 milligrams of each. And what I tell people is you can often get your calcium from your diet, especially if you're eating dairy, your green leafies, your nuts and seeds, your fish with bones. And if you're not, then you can take my picometer calcium and get proper absorption of what little you need. And I go for 600 milligrams instead of the 1,200, 1,500 that's the RDA in the US. In the UK, it's 600 or 700. The World Health Organization, it's 5 or 600. So, okay, let's go there. And I know that you can get your calcium from foods because if I OD on yogurt a couple days in a row, I start feeling my magnesium deficiency symptoms, a leg cramp or my heart will palpitate a little bit. So I thought, oh, my calcium is neutralizing my magnesium, so I just need more magnesium. So that's magnesium, calcium. Zinc and copper is another big ratio. Years ago, gosh, 30, 40 years ago, Carl Pfeiffer talked about copper and how it's toxic and we shouldn't be taking coppers. What was happening is copper was big in herbicides, big in plumbing. Then came the copper IUD in women. We were overloaded with toxic copper. But when you look at copper and the importance of it, I mean, we just can't not take copper. When you take a lot of zinc, which has happened in the past couple of years when we know that zinc is antiviral, people just were taking tons of zinc and appropriately for the virus, but that meant they were pushing out their bioavailable copper. So I work with zinc and copper with a ratio of 10 parts zinc to 1 part copper to keep that balance. And where copper is extremely important, it's in a transport protein called ceruloplasm. Ceruloplasm, it transports iron, and because it's got six atoms of copper in it, it's transporting copper as well. If you don't have enough ceruloplasm because you don't have bioavailable copper, you don't transport your iron to where it needs to be, and it builds up in bad places and causes iron toxicity, and then people tell you to donate blood to get rid of that extra iron, which you might not you'd be better off taking copper to transport the iron where it's needed.
It is. So if you had very low levels of like dietary copper intake, would you see that on a blood marker like ferritin?
That's difficult because you're better off doing a ceruloplasm level
Uh,
to find out if you've got something to transport that iron. It's all about the transport. And I don't, with my customers, I don't go medical, so I'm not offering blood testing and everything. But, the way I work it is if people are taking my zinc plus copper, they are getting their bioavailable copper, keeping their iron in balance, and they're not getting into trouble. And I've learned everything I've learned over the past 50 years, I put in, this compilation of just a handful of nutrients, like my multiple mineral that you mentioned. I don't mention product names because the FDA would have my head because I can't imply my products help people. But putting together the 12 minerals in the multiple mineral, it's all adjusted according to what I've learned. And in that multiple mineral, there is zinc and copper in the proper ratios, and it's low potency. Um, a lot of customers take my products to their doctors, and they say, "Oh, that's okay," because it's not high potency, hammer, but it's low potency, but it's 100% absorbed, I could say, or, almost 100. You can never be so dramatic, but fully absorbed.
can you contrast that to your average magnesium supplement? And I guess it's hard to say because there's so many different forms of magnesium, but I want to explore that a bit with you because if you scroll through Instagram or listen to any of the top health podcasts, you'll hear the hosts read out ads for products that have 5 forms of magnesium, 9 forms of magnesium, 15 forms of magnesium, and their justification is that each of these forms of magnesium impact different bodily systems and tissues, and so by having a broader spectrum, you're able to get the most possible health effects, and I know that from learning about ionic minerals, that might not be the case, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Right, it's a marketing ploy. I do have a YouTube video a few minutes long about magnesium compounds and what's going on there. So they're trying to sell their product and make like, oh, all these compounds are going to do different things. If you're looking to treat magnesium deficiency, you just want the magnesium. So, the citrate or the glycine and glycinate or the malate, they have their own functions in the body, but they don't treat magnesium deficiency. So they're promoting the malate for fibromyalgia or whatever. Well, you can take malic acid on its own. And what happens when you look at the amount of magnesium in these salts, and I have them listed in the in the 600-page book, and you can search, uh, for the amount in a magnesium salt. For example, I think the magnesium glycinate in a 500 milligram compound, it'll have 75 milligrams of magnesium and 425 milligrams of the glycine. And it's that way right down the road. The crazy magnesium L-threonate, which, it's so frustrating. Threonate, the magnesium L-threonate, they say, "Oh, it's the only thing that gets through the blood-brain barrier." Well, it was a 7% increase with the magnesium L-threonate compared to, I think it was a magnesium citrate in rat brains that allowed them to make that claim. And it
Wow.
made everybody think, "Oh my gosh, I get to buy this. Oh, it's so expensive." And you look on the label and it says 2,000 milligrams of magnesium L-threonate. And you turn the label over and you find out that you have to take 3 capsules, and each capsule has like 45 milligrams of magnesium. So you've gone from 2,000 down to 45. And it's just so frustrating because the marketing has gotten crazy. I used to go to a lot of the natural health conferences, health expos, they call them,
Mhm.
Health Expo East, Health Expo West. And through the few years that I went, I just saw it getting infiltrated more and more with the marketing managers from big pharma. They saw the potential in dietary supplements and they just went with it. And they use the same marketing. So if you have your headaches, your eye twitching, you're choking on capsules, all your, different, well, we have 600 muscles. So all these different muscles can be spasming. You have your shoulders are up to your ears, you're tense, your heart's palpitating. You have reflux because your diaphragms are in spasm. You have IBS because your bowels are all irritated and spastic, and you have leg cramps and even toe cramps. That's magnesium deficiency. Malic acid isn't going to help that. The threonate isn't going to help that. And one of the things that confused me, Nick, for years about the magnesium L-threonate, I thought, well, if they put the amino acid threonine in there, it's kind of a neurologic, helps with the neurotransmitters, it's calming, threonine. And then when I finally looked it up, no, it's threonate, which is a breakdown product of vitamin C. So it's not even an amino acid, it's some contrived chemical made from vitamin C. When they tell people, "Well, it's the only magnesium that gets into your brain," even magnesium oxide, which is 4% absorbed, has brain effects because the original research on magnesium was with magnesium oxide, and every study showed benefit. So, it's very frustrating because the industry has been taken over.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and even like big podcasters like Dr. Andrew Huberman frequently talk about magnesium threonate as if it's the only kind that has any impact at all on the mind. And like you're saying, I've looked at those bottles and it's like 5 capsule serving size with like a very, very small amount of elemental magnesium. Really expensive because I think that is a patented form of magnesium. There's certain mineral formulations that are patented and they're astronomically expensive compared like, for what they are, like, not even considering they're, like, not very bioavailable forms of the minerals. Like, another one is ZMA, and I think magnesium aspartate is one of the ones in ZMA, and it's like not a very high quality form of magnesium. And I think the other forms aren't very high quality either. I did notice when I used it that it improved my dreams. I had more lucid dreams, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing. It could be like a negative side effect of the stack. And also, if I made my own version of it with like better forms of the minerals, perhaps I would have better effects. But then again, like it's just fascinating to see the price difference for the patented mineral combinations.
Yeah, the magnesium L-threonate people did their research and studies, put, a lot of money into marketing and flooded everybody's mind, and then they patented it, and then the price tripled.
Do you ever recommend people look into using single minerals, single vitamins? Because like I have your multi-mineral product and I'm wondering perhaps I have a diet that's lower in zinc and higher in copper and I'd want a different ratio or vice versa.
I'm not gonna get into all those individual things. Like I said, I think what I did was try to average everything out that I learned and I knew, put it in a form that was low potency so that it didn't force issues. Because a low potency mineral, over time, the body's going to sort out what it needs. I do leave it up to the body. I'm not able to look at them maybe 1% of the population that has a genetic problem or an imbalance. But even then, I mean, think about it, Nick, how the 23andMe gene testing, where they're looking for what they say is gene abnormalities. They're not. They're just gene differences. What they've done with people, I mean, the methylated group, the MTHFR people, they look at their tests and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't methylate. What am I going to do?" So they'll go to a doctor who'll tell them to take a high dose of a synthetic folic acid, as if that's going to fix everything. And because I knew about this when I worked on my multiple my B complex, that also has methionine and taurine in it. Those are the only single amino acids. Then I put lysine in my protein powder. But the methionine and taurine are like detoxification precursors. The methionine is a precursor to glutathione, and the taurine helps solubilize bile salts. So they're just so important, along with the B vitamins, which are very important for detoxification. So my B vitamins are methylated and food based. So, and they're low potency. Again, low potency, you go in and slowly the body changes. I mean, the whole allopathic approach of it, let's slam it with as much as we can is just it's just too medicinal. Medicine did that with vitamin D when they started realizing the importance of vitamin D. What did I start seeing in my customers? They would be given 50,000 units of vitamin D, and they would just go crazy with magnesium deficiency, because what happens with vitamin D is you have to metabolize it into its active form with magnesium. So that huge amount of vitamin D was pulling all their magnesium in their bloodstream and out of storage to metabolize that huge amount, leaving them with magnesium deficiency symptoms. So single nutrients, yeah, I just stay with magnesium. And like I said, I do have the zinc copper because that became important with all this attacking us with viruses, and with silver. Silver is so important for the immune system, and also stimulates stem cell production.
Hmm.
And then calcium, I do have single calcium, but the multiple minerals, I think it's kinda playing with fire when you try to take high doses of any one of these, trace minerals, like boron, manganese, molybdenum.
Yeah, that's one of my big red flags when I'm looking at supplements. If they have high doses of those minerals, like they're the physiology and the biochemistry of it is so complex to not know like really eh, all the details of what your personal level is of each of these to just take high doses of them. I mean, as Carl Pfeiffer's works, his work showed, like that can have like very profound interactions throughout the body. So you got to be very careful with that kind of thing. But what I'm also understanding of the ionic minerals is that one of the benefits is that they're not high potency, but despite that, they still are able to stimulate the cells and enter the cells and assimilate into the cells at a similar level. So even though you're not using as high of doses, you're still able to nourish your cells in the similar way. I'm curious, are there any downsides of using ionic minerals? Like, why would I not want to use them, if any?
There's no downside. I think, when like we're talking about the low potency, but with magnesium, there are four contraindications. There's bowel blockage, myasthenia gravis, which is a condition of the muscles being too relaxed, very slow heart rate, for which people usually have to get a pacemaker anyway. Oh, yeah, kidney, uh, people on kidney dialysis or people with serious kidney failure. Everybody says as soon as you have kidney disease, don't give magnesium because they say I guess the kidneys aren't clearing enough magnesium, and you'll get these high levels of magnesium. It'll cause all kinds of problems. Now, the problems, quote, that you may peripherally hear about too much magnesium are from doctors who've given intravenous magnesium too high, too fast, and have sort of disrupted the electrical system of the heart.
We'll start to wind this one down. I'm curious, are there any natural sources of ionic minerals? The couple that come to mind for me would be shilajit and then also like seawater, I think has some ionic minerals in it, but like where else would this naturally be found?
I think those are 2 good sources, that it has to be in a liquid. Ions aren't gonna exist, in any other state but a liquid state. But it's all about the stabilizing of the ion. I mean, the ions, even in a liquid in seawater, are always going to be combining to make a compound and then disassociating. When supplement companies say ionic minerals, they're usually liquids, but they should not be solids or capsules or powders. It's always going to be seriously, Nick, the only stabilized ionic mineral is, the ones in my formulas.
Well, I still have so many other topics that I wanted to discuss with you. I thought that the second round today would be enough to cover all of them, but there's more. So we'll have to do a round three down the line, ideally after that study concludes, and that'll be a fun one to discuss. But before we go, I want to let people know where they can find you. And then I have one other question for you.
Sure, my product site is different from my educational site because the FDA won't let me tell you that my products can help. I love saying that. The store site is rnareset.com, and I got that name way before the whole mRNA stuff. The RNA is very important. So rnareset.com. The educational site is drcarolyndean.com, Carolyn, and there's a lot of free stuff there. I do blogs, I have a radio show, but some of my information where I actually talk about my products, I have to put behind a wall because what, Nick? The FDA won't let me tell you that I'm helping people.
Yeah, that's how it goes. And I think I have a code with RNA Reset too. It's either Urban or Nicholas Urban, one of the two, and that'll help people save on their order if they choose to pick up any of your products. My two favorites that I
Awesome.
use every day. I'll say it's the multi mineral and the magnesium, so I don't have to drop any names here. And to bring this all first full circle, if you are nutrient replete, you have great levels of magnesium, other minerals and vitamins. I'm sure your nervous system will be more capable of accepting all of those changes and rebalancing when you're doing the EFT tapping or other health optimization practices too.
Absolutely. Energy medicine cannot work without minerals.
Mhm. Well, Dr. Carolyn Dean, this has been a pleasure. Great having you back on the show. And like
Yeah.
always, looking forward to our next time recording together.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate you. Aloha.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.